Here at the High Court this morning again before Mr Justice David Nolan, who's continuing in his quest to strip Enoch Burke of his assets, of his salary, because of his refusal to accept the denial of his constitutional rights. And we have Mr Brian Kennedy, Senior Counsel, here in for the Attorney General Rossa Fanning. Long discussions this morning about how best to strip Enoch Burke's salary from him. A lot of technical information about employees in the Department of Education, how they're going to have to swear affidavits and get the machinery in place.
And the country
yes.
falling to pieces.
Yes.
With drugs, crime, murder, out of control, and we've spent almost, is it an hour or more in there?
About an hour or more in there.
Discussing how they can strip Enoch Burke of every right he has because he won't accept transgender ideology.
Yes, and there was a lot of trouble at the beginning of the hearing because in a judgment recently issued by Mr Justice David Nolan, it transpired it was based on information which wasn't before the court and really could only have come to the knowledge of the court by a back channel, which is very serious.
Very, very serious.
If a court is to make a finding of fact, it has to be based on evidence, affidavits or evidence sworn in court. But we have this judge, David Nolan, breaking rules, obviously being fed information behind the scenes, which is just very serious. So these people are prepared to go to great lengths to pursue Enoch Burke.
Then telling lies.
Yes, and when we simply raised it with him and queried what had happened, he
changed what Alex White had said.
He changed what the senior counsel from the Board of Management had said in the hearing on the 21st of January. So very concerning overall. What we have here really is the denial of Enoch Burke's constitutional rights. It goes back to that core issue. We do have freedom of conscience, freedom to profess and practice religious belief in this country. Enoch asked the courts from the very beginning to defend those rights, but they've never done that.
Isaac, what's extremely important here today is that this judge, David Nolan, is actually telling lies on the bench, and he's changing what Senior Counsel Alex White said, because the reality is that Judge Nolan got information behind
it's a back channel, essentially. We don't know where the information came from.
And when we brought it to light, he changes what Alex White had said.
In the court.
In the court.
Yes.
And then when we tell him that's not true, it's a lie, he rises and he calls the guards. Now the tragedy of all this is that this room, there's a line of journalists who are denying the public the truth from these courts. Nicole Gurning being chief, denying the public the truth. And that's a tragedy here today.
Yes, and what you'll get is a selective representation of what happens. Some selective mishmash that doesn't really bear any resemblance to what happened in the courtroom.
Yeah. So to cut a long story short, Enoch Burke was asked to affirm transgender ideology, to encourage a young man, 15-year-old, down a path of mutilation, puberty blockers, etc., etc. He refused to do so. He has a constitutional right to his religious belief, which is that God made them male and female. And we're at a stage now in this country where the judges working with the government and the school, Department of Education, are spending hours discussing how they will strip Enoch Burke of his assets, of his constitutional rights, of his salary, and even the Board of Management has mentioned life imprisonment. It is time for the people, the families of this country to rise up and say no. This is insanity what's happening. It's insanity, and they're not going to get away with it because God Almighty sees what's happening.
The court ordered that the Attorney General get liberty essentially to file a notice of motion to pursue Enoch Burke for his salary, so that at a certain point, they hope in mid-March, I think, his salary will simply be diverted into really the funds for the court here.
An excellent teacher, loved by his students in Wilson's Hospital, even some of them coming up, begging him for help still, asking him for advice and help for their exams, but stripped of everything because he will not endorse and affirm transgender ideology. That's where we're at now.